Welcome to R&R Livin' Life. In this episode, we leave our camp at Alroy and make our way to the Barkley Homestead, across the semi-desert country of Alroy Downs. Stop in near a very remote police station at Avon Downs and on to the Georgina River free camp, just over the border in Queensland. Our journey across the Barkley has brought back many memories from yesteryear of travelling and living in this isolated part of the Northern Territory. We left Alroy early, making for a striking morning, especially with all the blossoms in the trees, with huge flocks of budgerigars. Thankfully, no wildlife along the green pick on the edge of the road. The narrow bitumen was still challenging in places, with very rough edges, but all in all it was markedly better than between Brunette and Alroy, as we were further away from the river and channels. We had transitioned from Middlegrass Downs the Barkley is renowned for, into low, sparse eucalypt woodlands and arid shrublands, particularly featuring whitebark ghost gums, desert bottlebrush, bloodwood trees with their rough scaly bark, and other wattles. We were astonished to see the changes to the Barkley homestead, but then again it has been years since we were last here, not to mention bushfires and floods. The Barkley Homestead Roadhouse was built in 1984 and is located on the Barkley Highway between Tennant Creek and Camooweal, roughly 200 kilometres from Tennant Creek, bordered by vast cattle stations. We refuelled and had a walk around, remarking on the huge differences of how modern it had become. Long gone were the days when you had to roll your swag out behind the homestead when you needed a break or had too much to drink. The homestead now has motel accommodation and camping grounds, though they were inundated by flying foxes. This remote roadhouse, one of the most isolated roadhouses in Australia, generates its own power using solar and diesel generators during peak season. As we left the Barkley homestead, the landscape changes from open grassy plains to more wooded, undulating and sometimes rocky areas as we travelled away from the homestead along the highway. We were passing through Delmore, a semi-desert country with areas of fine red sand, low vegetated dunes and black soil areas. The area was vastly different to when we were through the area 30 years ago. Gone were the small trees or shrubs such as melaleuca species that hugged the road, replaced by more open vegetation, I think as a result of drought and severe bushfires over the years. We were getting a clear insight into how the topography of the landscape changes over time, and there seemed to be more water points. In 2023, a huge bushfire ravaged the Barkley in and around the homestead, Alroy and Delmore stations. More than 2.7 million hectares of the Northern Territory's Barkley region was burnt, also threatening Tennant Creek, with more than 37,000 head of cattle destroyed and over 3,500 kilometres of fencing. Such huge devastation. The Tablelands is a vast semi-arid region of flat, undulating, semi-dry savanna grass plains, covering over 280,000 square kilometres, nourished by subartesian water and seasonal watercourses, stretching north-east of Tennant Creek, north to near Newcastle Waters, and east to Camooweal, and south of the Gulf of Carpentaria. The Tablelands include 33 pastoral leases, was first explored by William Landsborough in 1861, whilst he was in search of the ill-fated Burke and Wills. Pastoralism expanded from Queensland onto the Barkley in 1865, as it was carrying a good body of nutritious grass, thought to be good for grazing, though the scarcity of natural water was a limiting factor. The tussock-like mitchell grass, with its deep and well-developed root system, responds well to rainfall and is now considered a valuable feed for grazing, as livestock rely heavily on it during the later dry season, especially when herbage along rivers and channels have disappeared. Water from the tableland flows into different places, with some draining into the Gulf of Carpentaria through the Flinders River, while other parts drain into Lake Eyre, or the massive ephemeral lake system comprising Lake Sylvester, De Burgh and Corella, located on Brunette Downs, or the Simpson Desert. However, waterways on the tablelands itself are small, with much of the water sinking into the porous limestone ground. The Lake Eyre Basin, Caddie-Thunder, is Australia's largest internal drainage system, covering 1.2 million square kilometres, approximately one-sixth of the continent. It is one of the world's largest, least modified arid zone river systems, characterised by a boom and bust cycle of rare floods and extreme dry periods, sustaining unique high conservation ecological, cultural and grazing areas. The basin began as a sinking landmass, mostly covered by forest, and contained many more lakes than now. The climate has changed from wet to arid over the last 60 million years. The locality of Rankin, with an area of just under 20,000 square kilometres, is located in the territory's east, adjoining the border with the state of Queensland. Consists of about 8 pastoral leases: West Rankin, East Rankin, Sudan Pastoral, the Ada, Avon Downs and Burramurra pastoral leases, as well as Rocklands and Austral Downs. Its name is derived from the Rankin River, which was named in 1860s after John L.C. Rankin, the pastoralist who first established Lawn Creek, which is now known as the Avon Downs Station. With just over 100 kilometres to the Queensland border, we pass Sudan Station on the Rankin River, an outstation of Alexandria. This area is the heart of Mitchell grass country, with rolling plains interspersed with red gravelly ridges, blue bush swamps, and the head of the Gregory and Georgina River systems. Near the homestead was a very large old steam engine, and then we crossed the Rankin River. Where water flows across what appears to be flat ground, you can make out the channels by the herbage and different colours of grasses. The highway is known for being subject to flooding in some sections during the wet season, which can cause temporary closures. In 2024, sections of the Barkley Highway were closed due to severe and dangerous damage after a heavy wet season, opening up huge potholes and ruts, with sections of the highway still showing signs of the devastating results of the flood. I always enjoy seeing cattle, this time making their way along the fence line. We crossed 6 Mile Creek with its stands of gidgee trees. Oh, the smell! Something that is hard to forget. Here the tablelands was dotted with trees sparsely spaced across the landscape and mainly restricted to watercourses or specific soil pockets. Common vegetation includes hardy drought-tolerant species like acacia shrublands. In 1866, John and James Rankin, 2 cousins from old pastoral families in New South Wales, herded 4,000 sheep to the area from Queensland's Mackay district, escaping severe drought. They settled in the area now known as Avon Downs. 3 watercourses are named after them: the Rankin and James Rivers and Lawn Creek. Other pastoralists moved to the area throughout the 1860s, but poor wool prices caused the Rankins and others to abandon the area. We were now back crossing flatter tablelands country, where burrow pits and small water holes along the edge of the highway still had water in them. About 60 kilometres from Sudan was the local police station, Avon Police Station, about 70 kilometres to Camooweal. Situated on the James River, the station is on the eastern side of the police district, covering an area of about 147,000 square kilometres, from Benmara Station to Colvin Hills in the north, Brunette and Rockhampton Downs to the west, Lake Nash and Georgina Station on the Sandover Highway to the south, taking care of 15 large cattle stations in the area, as well as Aboriginal communities. The main Barkley Highway and the Tablelands Highway dissect the district, with vehicles of all types travelling the roads. We stopped at the Avon Downs rest area, across the highway from the police station. Back in the 1900s, Avon Downs was one of the first stations to prove that the Barkley could carry sheep. Today, it now breeds primarily Wagyu cattle, run in conjunction with Austral Downs. Avon Downs is just under 4,000 square kilometres, while Austral covers an area of over 4,500 square kilometres. The rolling downs are covered in mitchell grass, amongst areas of gidgee woodlands on black to brown loam soils, with a good deal of limestone. Austral Downs is situated along the Herbert River and Happy Creek, both of which are tributaries of the Georgina River. Happy Creek is a watershed in the Northern Territory that takes a southerly course that crosses the Barkley Highway between Avon Downs Police Station and Camooweal in Queensland. In 1882, pastoralist Thomas Guthrie acquired just over 3,000 square kilometres of land on the Barkley tablelands, naming his property Avon Downs, inspired by his merino stud in Victoria, Rich Avon. In those early years, wool was carted 322 kilometres to Burketown before being shipped to Brisbane or Sydney and then on to England to be sold on the London market. By 1920, the frequency of droughts and the proliferation of pests, as well as the need to invest significantly in dingo-proof fencing, promoted a shift to cattle. Fortunately, Guthrie had been developing his cattle herd since 1885, and so the station was well prepared to pivot to cattle. He was also the first person to erect telephone lines in the area. During the 1950s, the shorthorn herd at Avon Downs was gradually replaced with breeds better suited to the environment, initially Santa Gertrudis cattle imported from Texas. Today, both Avon and its neighbouring property, Austral Downs, are used to produce cattle for AACO's Wagyu brand. Avon Downs, with its dry, expansive grasslands, relies on bores and ephemeral watercourses, typical of the region's arid climate. Rick and I have enjoyed crossing the Barkley, though some parts of the road left a lot to be desired. There have been a lot of places we knew as we lived and worked in and around this area, so have been doing a lot of reminiscing, but there is still a couple of places of interest to visit. We crossed the border into Queensland and made our way the 13 kilometres into Camooweal, before crossing back over the Georgina to a series of seasonal waterholes, most notably Lake Francis and Lake Canellan, featuring stunning, wide, still waterholes lined with coolabah trees. After setting up Gidget, I spent most of the afternoon watching the bird life on the lagoon, especially the three brolgas as they wandered the shoreline. Whistling ducks, wedge-tailed eagles, willy wagtails, pelicans, spoonbills, various egrets, herons and ibis also frequented the area. Having crossed the border, we were now relaxing on the banks of the Georgina, a river we feel at home on. The Georgina River is the north-westernmost of the three major rivers of the Channel Country in central West Queensland. That also flows through a portion of the Northern Territory. Part of the Lake Eyre Basin, the Georgina flows in extremely wet years into Lake Eyre. The river is named in honour of Georgina Mildred Kennedy, the daughter of Queensland Governor Arthur Kennedy. The river was originally called the Herbert River before being given its current name in 1890 to avoid confusion with the other river in North Queensland that bears that name. During severe floods, the river can be as wide as 15 to 25 kilometres in the upper reaches, and in the lower reaches from 25 to 30 kilometres wide. Inundation can last for months at a time, which can disrupt road transport in the area. The Georgina Basin has an area of around 232,000 square kilometres, or about the same size as Victoria. The new high-level bridge required nearly 6 kilometres of approach work, before we were crossing the 417-metre-long bridge. The water draining from the Barkley tableland that crosses the road here will finally reach Lake Eyre after many months. Flooding of the Georgina at Camooweal has been a long-standing problem, especially given the economic importance of transport on this route into the Territory. The new curved bridge that is both higher and longer replaces the previous low-level bridge approximately 50 metres south of the current bridge, and was designed to avoid placing pylons into the riverbed for culturally significant reasons. As the water levels in the Georgina vary enormously from being completely dry to flooding, the Barkley Highway Bridge over the river was often unusable for many days due to flooding, with road trains and other heavy vehicles having to wait weeks before it was safe to cross. Camooweal, with its rich droving history, offers a unique and compelling glimpse into Australia's past. The cattle train, cattle trucks, Drovers Camp Office and Drovers Camp Exhibition all provide windows into a world where the land and its people are inextricably linked. As the afternoon cooled, Rick and I went for a walk up to the trucking yards, a historic feature of the area's cattle industry. The area around the yards was once a resting point for drovers moving cattle along the Barkley stock route between Elliot and Camooweal at the Queensland border to fatten along the Georgina or towards the railhead that was once at Tajara. The 660-kilometre Barkley had 26 bores, all with Comet windmills attached, sunk 25 to 30 kilometres apart to fit in with a good day's walk for a mob of cattle. In days gone by, Camooweal was a drover's town. It was here that drovers let plant horses out to graze on the common, and where they rested up between droving trips. The Georgina stock route from here to the Channel Country was busy back then for a number of reasons. Primarily among them were the trucking yards at Tajara on the road between Boulia and Mount Isa, but it was also important for cattle going down to the clover-rich fattening country along the Diamantina and the Cooper. The cattle grazing areas were vast and often remote from markets, and so cattle had to be driven over long distances to roads and rail points. Most pastoral stations now rely on professional road trains to transport their cattle. What a fantastic way to spend the afternoon as we watched the changing colours of the sunset as we made our way back to camp. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Join us next episode as we make our way to Mary Kathleen, where we camp for a couple of days. Cheers for now. Live life to the full. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, Livin' Life.